Well, hello there, and welcome to the Second Life Book Club. My name is Draxtor de Prey. Another week, another amazing guest, one guest, and on top of it, a guest that demanded redecorating our venue. So if you can look around here, you will see there's some wonderful little chutskis here all over the place, and we'll get into that in a little bit. You may have also guessed that the broader theme today may have to do with the ancient ones and what the ancient ones are or are not. We'll get into that as well. Also, I look different indeed. As I look at myself at the monitor, I realize I not only have a new logo head made with very smooth skin, I have a new beard, lockdown style. I also still have apparently a vampire teeth. That was from a vampire shoot yesterday. Strawberry from Linden Lab sent me shopping. She was really fed up with my slider shoes and cartoon pants. Anyway, my guest hopefully approves of the decor and my outfit. We will introduce Premee Mohamed. Yes, she's in the house in just a minute after a few housekeeping notes. Most of you know the drill. The Book Club Island is open 24/7. We meet here every Wednesday at 12 o'clock with readers, writers, publishers, editors, people who cherish the written word. And this is very important to me. We do not discriminate against lapsed readers. So if the last novel you read was assigned to you back in high school, you are very welcome. Please ask what others are reading. They will recommend your book. They will befriend you. We have a new teleporting system outside. We're continuously adding destinations around the island, different platforms, different exhibits, reading areas. And since we're listed in the destination guide and under featured events, you may bump into a well-meaning noob. So please be kind, befriend them, and recommend some books. Join the group, suggest a show idea. You can always send me an email or an IM, slbookclub@draxtor.com. We're now booked through May 2021, but you can always suggest authors. I will pursue them. I will hunt them down and lure them into Second Life. I put out a reading list on bookshop.org. And if you click on any of the books that you see here on the table or lying around on the floor, that will shoot you straight to the current list of the books that are discussed that particular week. Lastly, big thanks to the team. Strawberry Linden is in charge of camera and streaming. Brett Linden helps out with security and marketing. Patch Linden, the whole governance team, including the molds. Marianne McCann customized the venue. Kralos dresses up the avatars, and big thanks to Silas Merlin, who makes special swag. He made this awesome statue here, the reading Draxtor dragon, who is sitting on my main couch today because I'm on the side couch. And lastly, we have a big partnership with Slink. They make fine Second Life skins, so all new authors are wearing Slink exclusively. Today's guest is Premee Mohamed. She comes to us from Canada. She's an author of many short stories of speculative fiction, horror adjacent, many of them, some full-blown horror in the Lovecraftian tradition. As I was joking off the air earlier, maybe she's totally typecast. She's so young and now she has to write Lovecraftian horror for the rest of her life. Her debut novel is Beneath the Rising. You'll find it here all over the place. It's I don't know how to describe it. It's really scary. We'll talk about it in detail later. It's very scary and very, very funny. It's about two young adults who try to help the humans to stay in their realm and close gates that may bring other dimensional beings into our realm. Premee is also a scientist. She holds degrees in molecular genetics and environmental science. Welcome to the book club, Premee. How are you?
I am fantastic. Thank you so much for the invite.
Now, how do you like your avatar with tentacles and all?
I love it. I'd never used Second Life before this, and I like the flexibility, and I especially love the tentacles. Thank you for the gift.
And everybody here has a tail, and later when we do the post game show, everybody gets a tail. So look underneath your seat. You get a tail. You get a tail. if you don't have a tentacle moving tail, actually Ghost Speed is just standing up, and you can see her tail there in the audience. Please message Arden Schwartzman, and he'll send you a tail. So, Premee, first time caller in Second Life, first time appearance in Second Life. Do you feel comfortable? I mean, I guess you can't tell yet, probably in an hour, but you're doing a lot of press. You've been on podcasts, and I'm assuming Zoom calls promoting your book. Is there anything that you feel is better here with us, with the Second Lifers?
I have to say, it's nice to be able to actually see the audience.
Hmm.
Nice to be able to feel like I'm in um, a room kind of. The problem with doing podcasts is you're talking to one person. You never know who's there or who's going to be listening to you or how they're going to edit it afterwards or what they're going to make you sound like. And with Zoom calls, of course, I have to clean my house and get out of my pajamas and this is much better. I like that there's more control here.
Thank you, Premee. And that's the end of the show, because now we can cut a commercial with
Dang
your
it!
statement. No, and before we go into the work, also what's really interesting, what I ask every author, how's the lockdown treating you? And we have many discussions around this, and people say, well, of course, I have more time available theoretically, also for creative pursuits, but the anxiety about the instability of the situation is really preventing me from being productive. So how is it in your house, in your part of the world?
Oh boy, that is a good question. My goodness. I'm working from home, which is good. I do have a full-time day job. Actually, so I have to apologize in advance in case my phone goes off. I have to keep it on for the job. But so I'm working from home, which is really good. So I don't have, the commute. I have a couple of chronic health conditions, so I'm very high risk for the stupid plague. And I'm not very productive, honestly. I can't focus. I can't remember things. I can't think. I'm even having a hard time reading and remembering what I've read. And I feel bad because I know that on the relative scale of things, I'm very much one of the lucky ones. Like I have friends that are much, much more stressed out than I am. They have,
Right.
kids at home or they're looking after elderly parents or they've lost their jobs or they're worried about their living situation. So I know I'm very lucky and I try not to complain too much, but boy, I am really, really tired of this lockdown.
Yeah. Is the chronic health condition such that you would have to normally go to see a doctor in person, or you can
Yeah.
you deal with that at
My
home?
monitoring appointments in particular have been canceled, so my cardiologist is a little worried about that, but will be more worried about it in 6 or 8 months because we are supposed to be keeping an eye on things. So I'm trying not to think about it.
Okay, so let's not talk about it, because let's go straight to the escapism part. But folks, thank you for sharing this, and let's remind ourselves that there are people out there who have maybe a harder time than we have. So let's extend our kindness and our thoughts to them. If our situation, and I'm talking about myself, my situation is fairly stable. Nothing much has changed, but there's a lot of people who need our help and our thoughts. Uh, Interesting. There's a microwave beeping in the background, and the microwave plays a big role in your story. As a matter of fact, there's a micro. Maybe that's how you got inspired in Beneath the Rising, because there's a microwave who brings back the ancient ones, opens the gate to the other dimension. So let me summarize this story. So Beneath the Rising is a novel. It's very funny. It's very scary. And I'm actually sometimes walking the dog in the park while I'm reading. That's how obsessed I am with reading. So I'm reading your book, and I'm so caught up in the story, and I find myself looking around with this powerful sense of unease. Maybe it's amplified with the corona situation, but I mean, really, you capture a sense of anxiety there in the book, and at the same time it's super funny. I'm not sure if it's a young adult novel. The protagonists are teenagers. They're from very different backgrounds in terms of class and ethnicity. There's a relatively poor boy, Nick, with immigrant parents, and a rich white Canadian girl, Joanna Chambers. She's a child prodigy. She invents a source for unlimited clean energy from a microwave oven, and that wakes up, well, the ancient ones. Now, I don't want to spoil anything. I'm not going to say if they save the world from the ancient ones or if the world goes down to hell in a handbasket. The kids travel around Tunisia and Iraq. It's the setting is amazing. Um, they try to find information on spells, how to keep the monsters at bay and keep them in the other dimension and stop total destruction. Now, Premee, I'm not sure if people here know who the ancient ones are, but first of all, is that a fair summary of the book? And who the heck are the ancient ones? What's going on here?
What is going on here? So I guess to start with, that's mostly fair, yeah. The microwave is involved for part of the process for making the reactor. And actually, it's funny you mentioned that. I thought that would be a fun, thing to do the reading with. So that's the part of the book that I'm reading is the invention. Um, my publishers decided not to class it as YA, and the reason for
Ah,
that, honestly, I am still not sure. I don't know what counts as young adult, and I don't know what counts as not young adult because, and I understand. I think it's probably mostly the marketing department or something, but I guess just having teenage protagonists is really not enough to class a book as young adult, and I'm not sure where the dividing line is. And um,
see, this is what I was thinking. I was thinking
yeah,
maybe it has to do with ratings because I mean your book is really is horror. I mean it's true. I mean I'm a horror fanatic. I mean people don't know I consumed horror movies specifically, and I read all the novelizations of all George Romero movies, and then I read your book, and it's brutal. I mean there is some real
no.
violence and sort of trauma in there, and then I thought maybe they don't classify because it's maybe too harsh. But then again, what kids watch
Well,
on
yeah, but
television,
then
I mean, it's
again, when you think
yeah,
about something like The Hunger Games or something, that's clearly
yeah,
YA, and there's a
oh yeah,
lot of violence in that. I mean, I didn't actually read The Hunger Games. I read the first book. I found it quite scary. And actually, it's funny that you mentioned the horror thing, right? Because we were actually turned down by a bunch of publishers who were like, "We loved it, but we don't know where to shelve it. It's horror and it's fantasy." And it's alternate history and it's sci-fi. So unfortunately, we're not going to pick it up. And that blew my
wow.
mind because I didn't think I had written a horror book. I never read horror. I find it quite scary, mostly except some of the older stuff. I don't watch horror movies. They're all too scary. Everything's too scary. So I don't know how this happened.
That is crazy. You find this is scary. Have you read your own books lately?
I'm trying to scare the characters, not the readers.
Yeah, yeah, I understand. Um, but that is so interesting. It really goes back to this. If the business side of things has issues in with their classification that is
Mm-hmm.
so so cookie cutter black and white, it's rather sad, I think. I mean,
Yeah,
yeah,
and I was a little, when we were on submission, I was a tiny bit upset about that too, because I had pitched it as a dark fantasy. And I was like, well, clearly you would just shelve it under fantasy. There's gods, there's monsters, there's magic.
right.
And they disagreed. But I'm very pleased with the publisher that did end up picking it up because it seems to me they're less concerned with the categorization and more excited about the story. So I was happy with that. Yeah.
I want to see in physical bookstores a shelf that says unclassifiable. That's the section where I would be all day
I would
long. Trust
shop.
me.
Yes, I would shop from there.
Absolutely.
I love those books. Yeah.
You know, you go in, you go like, "Hey, where's the unclassifiable section?" Oh, in the back there where there's no light, you have to bring your own flashlight or whatever. That's the section where we're gonna hang out. Yeah, I mean, by the way, folks on the stream, you can ask questions and please repeat them. I will glance at the streams, and Strawberry will also put interesting questions into my back channel so I don't lose them. We have a lot of viewers here. Jordan Chevrolet, I think that's your friend, Premee. He says, "Hi, Premee, a
Hi,
beetle
Jordan.
buggy." Yes, and fantastic. So now. why don't we start with a little bit of reading? And obviously, folks understand maybe with the integration of a lot of tentacle objects here in the room, and the mention of the ancient ones, which actually I asked you the question, and now we got off a tangent here. All this stuff is steeped in a universe or a world that was created by a controversial author by the name of Hp Lovecraft, and we will dive deep later on into Hp Lovecraft's uh, influence that he has to this day, and also maybe some of um, his problematic views from the time, because it's always an interesting question: can you separate art from the artist? Um, I actually had the Necronomicon. There is a Necronomicon that is still on Amazon. You can buy it for like $10 as a paperback, and we were 15 years old and we thought it was for real. But let's read something. And I already mentioned the microwave. Nick and Joanna. Joanna is the child prodigy. She's already a multimillionaire, I think, at 15 or something, or 10, or she invents stuff when she's 5. And Nick is her best friend. We're not going to say why. There's also a backstory here. But what are you going to read for us, Premee? And please also walk up to the podium. Here we have a wonderful.
Oh my God!
Look
Hang
at
on.
this. Look at this
I
amazing.
can do this. Stand up. Hang on. I can stand up.
You can do it. I
Excellent.
want everybody in the audience, please applause. A big round of applause for Premee. You know how hard this is. Come on, everybody was a noob once. We know how hard it is to walk in a
This is hard.
and
Okay,
by the
I reached
yeah,
I reached the stand.
Premee made it to the stand. Woohoo! Yes.
Okay, one sec. I don't know if I have to set anything. Oh my God, that's cool. It looks like the Necronomicon. That's funny.
The
Yeah.
Necronomicon is right here. Yeah, we'll talk about it later. It's
yeah. It's
written
I have a paperback copy of the Necronomicon as well. I think it costs like $5 in a used bookstore. And this
that's
is
the one I
usually, in
had
fact,
when I was
yeah.
15. Yeah,
This is why I usually say cosmic horror, not Lovecraftian. We're trying to get away from that because, anyways, well, we can probably get into that later.
oh,
But
I totally yes.
he
Let
wasn't the
me make
first. He wasn't the best. He just had a sandbox a lot of people like to play in. So I usually say cosmic horror.
Premee, that is exactly what we're going to talk about right after when we go into
Okay.
his impact. Yeah.
Okay, so where I'm going to read from is not quite the start, but it's just after Nick picks up his best friend Johnny from the airport, and she calls him and asks him to come over, and he thinks, well, this must be a pretty big deal. So this is page 21 in the book, in case people feel like reading along.
Again, let me say one more thing. And Premee,
Yeah.
You are writing this from the viewpoint of Nick, who is the boy. This threw me
Yeah,
off a
sorry,
little
I
bit
don't sound like a boy. Yeah.
because when we first met, what was funny, because I always pictured you in the beginning as Nick, and so just to clarify, so Nick is the boy who is befriended with Joanna, the super genius child prodigy. Go
Yeah,
ahead,
this
please.
is so we start here. After Mom came home, I reluctantly crawled back into my car. I didn't want to go over to John's. I wanted to take a 15-hour nap and not have one single interruption for a missing backpack, broken window, loose tooth, split lip, or stolen diary. And I was keenly aware that I smelled of armpits and rotten apple, like the break room at work, basically, and I had forgotten to put on deodorant this morning. She wouldn't say anything, I knew, but if Rutger was at the house, there would be some dirty looks. It wasn't that he didn't like me exactly, but that it was far too easy to inadvertently do one of the dozens of things he didn't like. Halfway there, I realized I'd forgotten to phone her, but there was nothing doing except to cuss at myself. Cell phones were great, but both of you had to have one, and I didn't. Johnny had about 6, but I didn't know the numbers for any of them. I was pretty sure she just used them as emergency lines for her various major labs and research centers. I couldn't imagine how much they would cost. For no reason, achingly, I remembered using walkie-talkies in the ravine when we were kids. We had barely needed them, though. I had always known what she was thinking. She always knew what I was about to say. My other heart, the heart that beat outside me. Had we grown strange to each other in her absence? Grown up, grown away, grown into Different people? Flying away from each other like the unknowable planets she had found with her telescopes and calculations? As I turned into her driveway, I had to pull my visor down to know where to stop. What the shit? Every light was on. Every room, every floor, hard blocks of white shining in the yellow late prairie sun. No way had she turned on all those lights. And in fact, hadn't she installed motion sensor lights a couple of years ago to make sure only rooms in use were lit? Was she having a party? I glanced around at the mostly empty street. Oh no, if it were a party, I'd never have been able to park in the driveway. And where was Ricker's Lexus? Uneasy, I splashed through the lush lawn in what was rapidly turning from sunset to dusk, triggering a set of halogen spots that shone right into my face as I punched in her code, praying she hadn't changed it when she got back. The alarm system was wired to call the police, if he fed it the wrong numbers. But it let me in, and I stepped into a blinding photosphere, forearm over my face. Johnny? No reply. I towed my shoes off and tried the intercom. John? It's me. Where are you? Hadrian, let me come up and get you, okay? What's going on? Every single light was on, even some I hadn't known existed, tucked away in recesses in the ceiling, behind floor vents, in sunk tracks on the walls. The heat was intense after the coolness of the evening. Sweat prickled on my back. Right. Stupid to believe I couldn't possibly smell any worse. Moisture was condensing under my socks on the cool tiles. She appeared at the end of the hallway, and for a second I thought she'd figured out how to make herself into a hologram. All silver spangles, shimmering and shivering, not really there. I hesitated before following her. Sorry, I said. I thought maybe you were a T-1000? That's the last goal of science, not the first, she said. But no one will want to be a robot after I show the world what just happened. I looked at her properly and did a cartoony double take, making her giggle. She was in a short, white dress covered in silver sequins. On anyone taller, it would have been practically a shirt. What the hell is this? I said. No offense, but we both know Rutger has to shoot you with tranks to get you to dress up. Yeah, like in the A-team, she said, pausing to do a little pirouette in the steel-toed boots she wore in her lab. I bought this in Venice. We were coming back from the conference center, and it was just so pretty, and there was only one left. My God, you're finally becoming a real girl. Don't be so gender essentialist, Nicholas, she sniffed. Anyway, I was just trying it on between two mirrors, and something just kind of... It was like, you remember that reactor I worked on a while ago? The one you were working on when you were 10? That's more than a while ago. You know what I mean, she said, speeding up to a trot. Listen, I was looking down at the sequence, and it just kind of, I don't know, I'd had a lot of coffee, and it seemed like they were sort of moving. Do you mind my asking if you slept last night? No, but listen, moving in a pattern, something I knew, or I knew the start, but not the end. I'd seen the start on the plane, like when you're at karaoke and you realize halfway through the opening that you don't know the verses, but just the chorus. But when the words come up, you realize you do know the verses after all. So I ran to write it down, and it seemed okay. I mean, it seemed like it should work if you look at the sequence as electrons. Anyway, I started the same as the old one, but this time I created the graphene substrate by making kind of a carbon snow. Is one of its side effects not needing to breathe? And it works! I switched the house grid off the solar cells and onto the reactor, and I'm sorry about the heat and the smell. I think that's mostly burning dust and bugs on the halogens. I keep meaning to switch them to the LEDs, but there's never time. She trailed off. Her face was slick and hectic, red dots below her eyes, hair not just damp, but actually dripping down her neck into her dress, churning the white to gray. Okay, I said. I'll come look, but then we're sticking a cold washcloth on you. She tapped a long sequence on the keypad, 30 or 40 digits, letting us into Hadrian, one of the more familiar of her many inexplicably named research rooms. I followed her, barking my shins repeatedly, around a maze of shin-height equipment and reels of cable, to an ordinary metal table bolted to the floor, lit with the same blue IKEA desk lamp the kids had in their room. The table was cluttered with tiny bits of metal and plastic, and had a shoebox-sized metal case on it sprouting a dozen black cables, one of which snaked into the darkness. It hummed unpleasantly, setting my teeth on edge like biting foil. Next to it, for some reason, sat a 4-pack of lemon Perrier, one half empty. I opened a full one and offered it to Johnny, who wasn't paying attention. I drank while she babbled.
So normally, you'd need a Grabowski plate to make real carbon snow, but then I thought, what have I got to get it up to the same temperatures, but, and this is really crucial, just in the microcavitations rather than on the overall flake surfaces, and I figured if I used the microwave instead of the forage in Belisarius. I gazed stonily at it. The lab microwave was about as old as she was, smeared yellow and brown, a very ordinary little box, dwarfed by the equipment around it. After a minute, I said, I made a pizza pop in that yesterday. I suggest you not try it today. So the new graphene torus is a what? All right, the graphene donut is actually that's not the word I was atomically paid in silver, which I got from melting down my Cartwright metal. But it's okay because if you tell them you lost it or had it stolen or whatever, they'll just send you a new one. But it's stainless steel. I already sent them an email. So now we've got this topological graphene matrix, right? And it's creating edge effects because I gave it a fractional angstrom flex and then linked it to the C398 magnet that I sort of pulled out of the RCNCI back end over there. It's fine. I'll buy a new one. And in the aqueous matrix, the electrons display independent choice behavior and they start to generate their own topographical material, which isn't real. What? Under the Eurofiev definition anyway, but it's so close to the border between the definition and the quantum definition that from their desire to return to their original state because they immediately regret their choice, right? They discharge energy. And bam! Bam, I said weakly. That's the loop. The choice and the second choice. A renewable electron source. Electricity. Anyway, I calibrated it to the house draw, but if my calculations are correct, there's kind of no upper limit to production, she said, absently tightening the clamps holding the box to the table. Wait, stop. Drink this. I forced the bottle on her, as much to shut her up for a second as to get some water in her. Are you telling me this shoebox is powering the house and could power anything? Yeah, does that sound okay? Is that too insane? She choked on the first sip, water trickling down her neck. Yeah, it's running on a little bit of Perrier because I can't use the sink right now. I sort of welded a Johnny, you made a shoe plant. You made a power plant in a shoebox. It's not a shoebox, thank you very much. It's a shielding setup that is this going to cook my sperms? I don't think so, but maybe don't hump it all the same. The shielding isn't really necessary, I don't think, but it does seem to dampen down the harmonics, and maybe it'll be quieter when it's on a metal surface. I don't know. Harmonics? Is that what we're calling that incredibly annoying noise? I feel like I'm chewing on tinfoil. What's causing that? Beats me. I'm guessing the impurities in the silver. Not the artificial lemon flavoring? Okay, I think that's enough reading.
That's awesome, Premee. And this all happens in Joanna's house. And we should have said that Joanna has this house that looks fairly normal from the outside, and inside it's huge, and there are huge research labs inside. There's a huge octopus in a huge aquarium, and it's one of those things like I guess Doctor Who's TARDIS a little bit that is gigantic inside but looks smaller on the outside. And this is the origin of the device that will thin the membrane between their world and ours. If you're just tuning in, this is the Second Life Book Club with Premee Mohamed. She is our guest today, and she just read from her debut novel, Beneath the Rising. Still not sure why this shouldn't be classified as YA. Very interesting. Please take a seat, Premee.
Okay, hang on.
Here we go. You can do this.
I can do this.
Let's cheer her on. There we go. So now you just mentioned earlier that let's talk about Lovecraft a little bit because you classified this as cosmic horror, and you were just sort of alluding to that there's a little bit of I guess within the writers community, folks may be a little bit upset that everything is sort of credited to Lovecraft as having sort of invented that type of setup. I don't know if people. I mean, I'm always assuming that everybody knows who Hp Lovecraft is. Just want to very briefly throw this out. Lovecraft was born in 1890, lived till 1937, and he is created the Cthulhu mythos, where the ancient ones live on a different dimension than they once ruled over the earth, and they're super evil, and they're sort of gate between us and them, and sometimes people who are not very smart and are just in pursuit of knowledge without any sort of moral backbone, they look where they shouldn't look, and then the gate opens and they come back, and Cthulhu and their people are destroying mankind. And there is also the elder gods who were benevolent and fought against the Cthulhus, and so on and so forth. So and I need to say this because this is something I did not know, that the Cthulhu mythos, or the term, as was actually coined later by August Derleth, his publisher. Cthulhu comes from a story, The Call of Cthulhu, but then to wrap this all into one universe. But you're saying that cosmic horror was there before Lovecraft, or you feel more steeped into a different tradition and not necessarily in Lovecraft, or where does your work come from? What's your relationship with H.P. Lovecraft?
Well, it's with him personally bad. I do actually think he should be put into a cannon and fired into the sun. But he himself was drawing from older traditions, the folklore and the myths, even Greek myths of things like, monsters and unknowable giant things. He certainly wasn't the first writer to come up with the idea that the villain in the story could be, more powerful than you, could actually be a god or a spirit or something. He spoke about his influences, Edgar Allan Poe and stuff, and Clark Ashton Smith and Lord Dunsany, and then there were a lot of people writing similar stuff before him, during his time, and after him, and they brought different things to the table. And I find it really interesting, even to this day, that he, the worst person personally out of all of them, because of his racism and classism and bigotry and the various discrimination and hatred that he displayed towards people, even his friends were like, okay, Howard, cool it. This is pretty bad, even at the time.
Even Robert E. Howard was saying,
even
like,
Robert
dude,
E. Howard,
you're overdoing it.
Like,
But yeah, we sorry to step in here, because I
Yeah.
do want to make this very clear, because you always bump into people where they say, well, you have to understand, at the time it was it was more widespread. And as a yes, I'm aware that at the time, in the early 20th century, racism was maybe I actually don't know if it was more widespread, but that does not make it okay. At the time, it was also not okay, or it shouldn't have been socially acceptable to spout stuff that he said, or write poems with a title such as "On the Creation of N-Word," plural.
Yeah.
Okay, so please don't spare me the discussion of, well, this was 100 years ago, times were different. Yes, they certainly were. Go ahead,
Yeah.
Premee.
But thank you for pointing that out, because even his peers were like, okay, maybe you feel this way, maybe you are in fact a huge racist, and maybe you also hate, immigrants and Jewish people and women and vegetables and the sea, blah blah blah. There's no reason that any of that has to go into your fiction.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what I really dislike the most about him and about his stories is that there doesn't need to be any of that in there. It doesn't actually affect the story if you take out the actual discrimination.
Right.
It reminded me, he's got a story, I don't think too well known. It's just called something like The Silver Key, or The Silver Key in the Tree, something like that. And there's there's ancient ones or evil gods. We're not sure. They're up on the mountain somewhere. The narrator hires a guide, and this is set in ancient Roman times, and he makes a big point of pointing out the guide was a boy, and he had two pure Roman parents. And I just about threw my Kindle across the room. I'm like, what do you care? Why did you point that out, you ding dong? Like, he was absolutely obsessed with racial purity, and
Mm-hmm.
I find that really, really ridiculous, because he's an American. He's aware that if he's not an indigenous person, he is an immigrant himself. So his anti-immigrant hatred is not only, of course, very nasty, but it's absolutely ridiculous. What a hypocrite. Like,
it is interesting. I mean, of course, there was, as you pointed out, and some of the words as I was doing my research here. I mean, I was a huge Lovecraft. I devoured Lovecraft as a teenager. I'm not an expert or a super fan or anything, but it was very instrumental for me in my horror phase. And like I said earlier, I did buy the Necronomicon at a local store in Munich for 10, 15 Deutschmarks at the time. I don't remember. And we were sitting there as 15-year-olds. We were reading this, and seriously, I mean, I'm not kidding. We thought like, okay, let's try to get the ancient ones back to take over the world. I mean, we were really just like Joanna Chambers, I guess. I mean, she wasn't. It was okay. Let's not spoil too much of your story. Um, but we thought it would be cool to be of service to the ancient ones. Get the Necronomicon and read those spells and draw something on the ground and see what happens. So I know I was a late bloomer intellectually. Don't at me, please. But so yeah, a lot of the words he used comes from Greek mythology and certainly the concept of otherworldly and other dimensionally beings that are out there and trying to get back in and take over is not a new thought, but he was instrumental in putting this into pop culture, and his impact is just yeah, it's huge in
yeah.
music, in art, and everywhere. How should we deal with this, Premee,
Yeah, obviously I'm
in the
not going to make
public discourse?
any grand proclamations, but this question does come up a lot, doesn't it? There's lots of writers where we find out either from their writing that they had these disgusting views towards people, or we find out from their letters or something like that. Like you're reading something perfectly innocent, and somebody leans over your shoulder on the bus and says, Virginia Woolf was extremely anti-Semitic, and you're like, oh well, now what am I supposed to do with this book? Right? Like, you have that feeling that as soon as you find out these things about people, you have to immediately kick them to the curb and never talk about them again and never consume their stuff again. And I don't think that's the way to go forward.
Yeah.
I think I like more kind of this wave of newer cosmic horror that's coming out, like from Victor LaValle and Matt Ruff and Cassandra Caw and Caitlin Kiernan and Charlotte Strauss and all them, and I guess me, who are taking these sandboxes, like Lovecraft and others, and Arthur Machen and them, and picking out the things from it that we like to
Yeah.
reuse, because you
Yeah.
have to. Like, he was very imaginative, at least. Like, okay, the plots of his stories tend to be kind of repetitive, but the imagery and
The
the
image
monsters themselves, yeah, it's all very
exactly.
vivid and lively. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what I was when I was reading your book, and then I got like, wow, this is so cool, and I got all this sort of flashbacks to my Lovecraft time, and then I realized, and a lot of people have pointed this out, that they would say, well, he was really kind of also a mediocre writer, and oftentimes he would just say unspeakable. They would look, instead of
Yes.
describing it in detail and really, elaborate prose, he would just say, well, they were unspeakable. But the weird thing is that this word unspeakable is actually a really powerful word. And
Yeah.
because I read this when I was fairly young, when somebody says to me, when I asked them, so how was the scene? And they say, well, it was of unspeakable horror. I get the freaking chills. I'm telling you this. But your prescription here, I think, is fantastic. And your book also at the helm is a young a man who is of immigrant. The parents are from Guyana, and the same with Matt Ruff, which plays in the African American community.
Mhm.
So I always think like this makes Lovecraft roll in his grave, and that's pretty cool.
I hope so.
Yeah,
That's
let's make him
literally
roll in his
that is
grave.
what I hope, is that we take these things that are bad and ugly and cruel and discriminatory about his work, and we don't, kind of gloss over them or ignore them. We actually take the spotlight, turn it back around, and put it on the people that he would have hated. So
Yes.
it's not quite exactly, oh, well, it's our turn now, we're going to play with your toys. It's more just pointing out that he had these views that he insisted on putting them in his fiction. In fact, if you really think about it, sort of that racism is the backbone of all his work. It fuels all of his things. To him, immigrants were not really different from the ancient ones. You know, you couldn't understand them. They were taking over. They were invading. They were, quote, contaminating pure women, et cetera, et cetera. To him, they weren't really different. And so for newer writers, we can take these tropes and spin them around and point out, this was gross, this was wrong. Don't we have enough to be afraid of without pointing fingers at and hating each other, you know?
Right. This is really well put. Here in the chat, Calamity Hathaway says, when you were reading him, I guess me reading Lovecraft when you were so young, how did you feel about his racism? This is a really good question because I tell this story often. So just real quick, my mother was a little bit of a, I always jokingly and lovingly refer to her as a literature snob. She was putting all the important German, Thomas Mann, Heinrich Böll in front of my nose, authors who I love today, and also contemporary German authors. Great stuff is going on, literary stuff. But I was reading Conan and I was reading Lovecraft, and she felt that this stuff was pretty bad. And she actually went to the local store and said, my son has a knack for sci-fi and fantasy. Is there something that is a little bit higher quality? And the local store owner, who just recently passed away, really changed my life by recommending to my mother the Canticle of Leibowitz by
I
Walter
love that
Miller.
book.
Unbelievable book. Everybody should read
So
it.
good. Everybody
Yeah.
should read it. I
Yeah.
love that book. Yeah.
It's amazing. So where were we? So Premee, yes, really well made. These the points here, and how we can take that and use it. But you're mentioning also, and I don't know, I'm not a Lovecraft scholar, but I would assume that there's
Me either.
there's probably lots written about the fact that his own paranoia and xenophobia, the writing was an outlet for him. When I read your book, what's amazing actually, because I read so much dystopian stuff, because all these authors that are coming on the show, they all are cli-fi and dystopian. The world's just going to shits. I'm joking. I love that stuff. And actually, it doesn't. There's also a big question, and I want to ask you this too. If you feel that this type of stuff leads to apathy, some people would say that if you just consume dystopian scenarios, it will not activate you. It will actually just keep you sort of in an apathetic state. I kind of disagree with that. But in your book, I feel that all the stuff that they're up against, the two kids, they're trying to save the planet from the ancient ones coming back. And the membrane is wearing thin, and you can see that they're trying to rip open this gate, and it's exemplified by basically a natural disasters almost. I mean, you kind of hint at that. So I was thinking like, oh wow, maybe that's for you, the ancient ones are a metaphor for, I don't know, late stage capitalism and extractive practices that ruin the planet. As it was for Lovecraft, it was the immigrants are ruining everything. I don't know.
I don't know.
Think
I hope somebody writes a master's thesis about it or something, because I have no idea what was going on in there. I really thought the ancient ones were a metaphor for the ancient ones. But when you're talking about dystopias, that is so interesting. I have heard actually people say, yeah, why are we reading all this stuff? Why are so many dystopian disaster apocalypse books coming out? They just make people want to give up and not try, and then they'll become apathetic. And I thought that is so interesting. I don't feel that way when I read those books, but I do wonder why there aren't more books where people are trying to prevent the dystopia from happening, where people are racing to get in the way of the apocalypse.
Yeah.
All those dystopias, it's kind of like the worst is already past, and now we're living in
the
this,
Hollywood domain,
this grim, horrible, this terrible world, and there's nothing we can do about it. Although, again, if it's a YA book, hopefully a young woman and a young man and a couple of their friends get together and they fix it with a revolution. But I did feel like Beneath the Rising was trying to prevent a dystopia from happening, even if they didn't know for sure that it was going to happen. Because I guess, without more spoilers, another plot point in the book is that the Ancient Ones aren't new. They've visited Earth before. They've been here before. They've been repelled by determined and desperate people. And And that's something you actually don't see in Lovecraft stuff specifically, is generally you see the monster and you go
Yes.
mad. There's
Yes.
nothing you can do about it. You can't fight it. You can't shoot it. You can't kill it. You can't ask it to leave. It doesn't care what you think. It won't talk to you. It's like,
That's a great point. It's another completely different, because also what I read about Lovecraft is his own home-baked philosophy called cosmicism, which is
yeah,
which is really kind of nihilism, right? Because you can't do anything anyways. And your book, and also Matt Ruff's book, Lovecraft Country, those are uplifting stories. I mean,
yeah.
these are regular human beings who are faced with this, and they're very proactive and they do stuff about it, while the Lovecraft philosophy is like, yeah, it's over because
Yeah,
humans
it's
are
over. I
just
went mad.
yeah. Well, his father did go mad. He had a psychotic episode, but that
Oh, well, that explains a lot more of his books then. Because, yeah, all you have to do is look at the monster in most of his stories and you lose your mind. Or your
yeah,
friends lose their minds and then you have to go visit them in the asylum and it's very sad. But
it's
also, someone was
unspeakable.
just saying in the chat that dystopias are actually about human creativity and perseverance. And I totally agree with that. It's
Ah,
about the human desire to cling to life and to normality and to each other and to build something back under very difficult conditions. So maybe that's why people read it. But if what people are getting from that is apathy, I kind of feel bad for them. I don't think that's what those books are trying to communicate.
I actually think, and this is this is wonderful, Jazz. Thank you for this comment. Also, of course, Arden, my good friend Arden,
Mm.
based when Mr. Krabs lost the secret recipe to the Krabby Patty
Yes.
bikini pot and went instantly Mad Max dystopian with leather straps and dumpster fires. Arden, I don't watch TV, but I know you're referring to SpongeBob, so I'm not that out of the loop in terms of popular culture. Thank you. Watch the movie. Oh yeah, right. They have a movie too. Well. Uh, Okay, after the end of the show, I will watch the SpongeBob movie. I promise. Uh, but the I don't know. I mean, I differentiate sometimes between movies and books, because I think the glossy nature of movies, and I think I need to do a whole show on Starship Troopers, because
Mhm.
a lot of this been talked about, and Verhoeven is there's a lot out there, and don't want to get completely off a tangent, but Starship Troopers was uh, an example of a deep satire
Mhm.
that was really not uh, people really didn't get that, or people in
Not in the movie. No, yeah.
relevant reviewers at the time didn't get that. So I think there's something about the visual form vis-a-vis books. I think when you talk about dystopia, the book has a higher impact than I think a film. A film
Mhm.
can make a terrible scenario glossy. Case in point is the 13 Reasons Why, which is a powerful book about suicide, a YA book, and the Netflix series is, I think, a huge mistake, because it makes it presents this topic in a format that you cannot present this topic in, but that's just my
Mhm.
opinion.
Yeah,
Uh,
no, I guess my big thing too is that people often ask me if if there was ever film interest in the book, whether I'd write the script or not. And I'm like, I don't think I actually would be able to write a script or a screenplay, because to me the novel is all about interiority.
yeah,
And scripts and movies are all about the externals. You can't actually communicate, except with clunky voiceovers and stuff, what people are thinking. And everyone's like, show, don't tell, show, don't tell. Well, the
yep,
point of a novel is to tell.
exactly. And I
So
think
that's
that,
why the nuance was lost with Starship Troopers, I feel. Yeah.
but you really think that your book is, you didn't think about climate, cli-fi, or just sneak some of the stuff in there? It was pure an escapist romp, and I say
I
this
did.
as a big compliment.
Especially the polish before I was creating it, because while I was polishing, I work for the environmental ministry of the province where I am, and I was like, I want to make a little bit more of a big deal about the meaning of the reactor, that the reactor could help uh, be the thing that quote saves the world unquote. And
Yeah.
this is something that Johnny, being not only an egomaniac but a scientist, is desperate to do. She feels that's her goal in life. And anyway, yeah, that doesn't really work out. But like the reactor is meant to be the thing that improves life for everybody.
Right. Well, it's the same. Oh, this is a good point. See, I read right past it, but you're absolutely, that is a great point. So she's a conflicted scientist in that sense, who splits the
Mm.
atom, and the atom can make a bomb or make energy,
Hmm.
kind of like that.
Yeah, it's a very dangerous thing. You know, it could be useful or it could be weaponized, or let's take a minute to think about that. But of course, they don't get a minute to think about it.
It's really, I mean, again, Premee, my hat is off as a reader looking at this. How you constructed this, how you kept the pace going. I was joking with you yesterday at the little test run here with the sound check that this book is like Dan Brown, if Dan Brown could actually write decent prose.
I haven't read any Dan Brown, but I will take that as
Well,
a compliment.
yeah, don't. Um, but how did you get into, just real quick, and we're oh my God, we're running out of time. When we're having too much fun, we're running out of time. We're
Oh
gonna do
no.
one. We have time for one more reading, and it's your choice if you want to read some of your short fiction, or if you want to do another from Beneath the Rising. But a real quick question before that: the writing itself, coming from a scientific background, have you always written stuff? How did
Oh
you
yeah.
get to a point where you felt confident that you can put yourself out there? This is a question I find very important, because we have a lot of aspiring writers in the audience here and on the stream.
Oh God, yeah. No,
How do you get?
I
Yeah.
totally hear you. I've written my whole life, and it's funny now to see people referring to me as a new writer. I'm like, I finished my first novel when I was 12. I've always written. The novel is the length that I'm most comfortable with, and I actually finished this book, Beneath the Rising, when I was in my first undergrad back in 2002. So for people that are complimenting it and saying, "Oh, if it really feels like everything feels very authentic," then they're using like Netscape Navigator to get around. And I was like, yes, that's when it was written. Like, that's why everything feels very real, and nobody has a cell phone when they really need one. But uh, yeah, so of course I finished the book, and I put it away because that's what I did with everything that I wrote for many years. And it wasn't until about 2015 or so that I thought, a friend of mine was pushing me to start writing short stories. And then I thought, well, maybe I could try to publish one of my many bad trunked novels that I set aside. And
Mhm.
Beneath the Rising was done. So that automatically moved it to the top of the list.
Ah.
So I polished it up before querying, and my agent gave it one more quick polish, and my editor also did one more quick polish. You know how the publishing thing goes. But it's about 85% what was finished the year I graduated, 2002.
Wow.
So yeah, I'm excited for people to read it and hopefully feel like they are back in the day.
Do you feel that there is, and that's why that's now I understand why the 9/11 attacks, which take a different turn in the book. I mean, they're being alluded to, uh, and the situation in Iraq at the time. Now I understand. Ah.
Hmm. Hmm.
Mhm. Well, we won't spoil anything.
Yeah,
You,
no,
Elfbiter
we
here
won't.
in the chat says dystopias also give lots of excuses to create post-ruin world where people can freely shoot each other. That's true. That's one subset. Yeah,
I think
because
that's a subset. Yeah.
of course all the other people that aid from aside from the protagonist are hostile, gun nut paradise. Yeah, that's definitely a subset that gives sort of license to I don't know, I always call it the libertarian wet dream, where
Yeah. The
it,
weirdo, the preppers and stuff. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So and yeah, that stuff is very problematic, but I think it's a subset, and I do feel that dystopia as a broader genre does have a lot of opportunities to present really great imaginative solutions to current problems.
I agree,
Uh,
because they tend to be about the most primal thing that we tend to not think about a lot, which is survival. And there is something really kind of inherently noble about survival, about surviving against the odds. I mean, you read Cormac McCarthy's The Road, and
yeah.
first glance, you think this is the bleakest thing that's ever happened to anyone, and I'll never be happy again. But it really is about hope and about how it means something to stay alive and to want the people around you to stay alive.
I was just looking up a book by Dennis. what is it called? Fiscadero. I have to look it up later because that's another a wonderful book by a literary author. We're running up against the clock. We have a few minutes over, and then we will do our post game. You have a sequel in the works.
Yeah,
that is
I don't
also
have
on
to
the
do the second
table.
reading either. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. They did the cover reveal just a couple of weeks ago. So yeah, that's supposed to be coming out March 2021.
A Broken Darkness. Did you set it up for a sequel, or is that
No, I
not
did
something
not.
where you have to? So is that a problem now when you have
Yes.
a pre?
Oh my God. Yes. I've told this story before, but I wrote the book as a standalone because I didn't know how to write a series when I was 20. I was like, I don't know what's going on. So I wrote it as a standalone. I pitched to my agent as a standalone, and he said, publishers really like series, though. Can we pitch this as a trilogy? And I was like, oh, I don't know. I guess if that's what you think we should do. So it was written as a standalone. It was pitched as a trilogy, and then the publisher bought 2 books. So I had to go back and try to figure out how to make just a second book and not a third book out of the outline that we had come up with like a year or something before. So I don't know what I'm doing. I hope the sequel is okay.
I think you'd be okay because you left. I mean, from a reader's perspective, you left the world open. There's enough of stuff because obviously the Nick and Joanna. There is also a little bit of a possibility for. I mean, there's some unrequited love and stuff like that too that can be explored, I guess.
I guess that's the next thing. The nice thing about writing a book where things aren't simple or black and white or easy is that there are always complications that can get more complicated in a later book.
Yeah. I have an idea. We can we can go in the post game. We have 30 minutes until the bottom of the next hour. We can do in the post game. We can do a little bit of hanging out on a different platform. And if you want, you can read or people can ask questions. We have a few minutes left. I actually do have a question from an audience member sent me previously already before the broadcast, Jessica Genevieve, and she asked. She read on your blog about the second book, and you said that one of the options was that you could write from the villain's point of view. So that's very interesting. I didn't read this blog post, but can you expand on this idea? I mean, it's like the ancient
Oh
ones.
yeah.
Do they speak English or?
They,
The ancient ones. I'm so stuck on the
the
ancient ones.
ancient
I
ones.
am
Oh
afraid
God,
of the ancient ones. Premee,
you should
listen.
be afraid of the ancient ones.
Well, I had.
They're not very nice.
I'm visiting my dad now every Sunday. Actually, we help out in the suburbs, and I've been rummaging through the attic. I can't find the Necronomicon, and I know I had it. But
Oh
anyways,
my God, it wandered off.
so
That's what it does.
how do you write from the villain's point of view, or have you already?
It was something I was tossing around because I was like, I've never written a sequel before. I've read a lot of sequels, and some of them I thought fell flat. And I thought, well, that's going to happen to mine, obviously. But how could I shake it up, maybe? And I was like, well, maybe I could move it forward, 20 years so that they're my age now instead of because they were my age when I started writing the book. I was 18 when I started writing it. Maybe I could write from a minor character's point of view. Hell, maybe I could write from the villain's point of view. I don't know. Maybe I could just switch something up and maybe it won't suck. I don't know. Maybe it will still suck, but it would be interesting because, the premise of all these cosmic horrors, like, again, Clark Ashton Smith and Arthur Machen and Lovecraft and Howard and all them, is that the ancient ones are so old and powerful and intelligent and magical, et cetera, that they don't really look at us as anything except insects. And there's a lot of Lovecraft. Nyarlathotep is one of the ones that comes to mind, who actually does, show up on Earth and mingle with humans and pretends to be human and looks like a human, et cetera, et cetera. But the vast majority of them aren't anything near human. So my first thought was kind of, oh, this is going to be tricky. How do you write a book from things that don't read books or talk to people or that kind of thing? So that's not what the sequel is, unfortunately, but maybe it's something that could be explored later on.
Have people are taking notes. Now you got a good idea that you can steal or run away and execute it. Premee, this is fantastic. I think we're gonna wrap the main hour, and then we'll go into the post game. Premee Mohamed, all her books are, not all of them, but a lot of them are here on the table. They shoot you to the reading list of today. Beneath the Rising is out now. There is a lot of anthologies with titles such as Broad Knowledge, 35 Women Up to No Good, Shoreline of Infinity, and there is a bunch that are specifically about beings with tentacles. I guess I was joking
Yeah,
that you were now
all my
typecast.
short fictions on my website. If there's a link to read it for free, there should be a link up there. So if people want to read the short stories, knock yourselves out. And if you spot Easter eggs that are in the novel, that would be delightful. Just saying.
Awesome, and you also and the Apple Tree Throne, which sounds
Yeah.
really really yummy in the summary on Amazon. You told me that this is on Kindle only, but you may release
Unfortunately,
this
yeah.
as a. Can you release this as a paper book, or are there any plans?
That is the plan, yeah. What I would like to do actually is sort of a special deluxe edition. I'd like to illustrate it and release that as the physical version.
You are also an illustrator.
Amateur, but dedicated.
Why do people have so many talents? I have absolutely no talent. I
Oh,
bought
you
a
have a good
clarinet.
talent.
I bought a clarinet and I can't play it. I
Well, no one in my
returned it.
family has any musical talent whatsoever, so you're not alone there.
Uh, um, Now I'm stumped because I was trying to make a joke because I actually this is the only thing that I'm fairly good at is actually music and yelling at my dad when we get into politics. But Premee Mohamed, thank you so much for being here. We're going to go into the post game. The reading list is ready. If people in the audience want to put what they're reading into the local chat, I will add this to the reading list. I just attached a book to myself that I'm reading right now. I'm actually finally starting to read Karl Marx Das Kapital, and I'm reading in America, it came out as The People's Marx, which is an abridged, condensed version of all three volumes of this Capital. Let me just tell you, wherever you are on the political spectrum or however you look at current social problems and political questions, I would encourage you to read it. I read this religiously, 10 pages every morning. It's a very challenging read. I'm taking notes, but it is quite mind-blowing how Marx in 1867, when this book came out, saw the relationship of the different actors in the economy. So it's a really really, I think, important intellectual exercise to put your nose into this particular book, especially because there's a lot of pundits out there on various media that sort of claim they know who Marx was and what he is and how he impacts things, good or bad. And it's pretty obvious that they have never even read, I guess, the summary on the back. So Arduin is saying "Win It to an Old Shatterhand" by Karl Marx. That's a different Karl, but I have that in my shelf as well. So many thanks to my team: Strawberry Linden, Brett, Marianne McCann, Praylos, who made your wonderful avatar. She actually lives in the same city that you live, Premee. Maybe your next door neighbors and you don't even know.
Oh my god.
Yeah, let's not. We must not disclose where you guys live because you get
Oh.
so many fans. Thank you guys for coming. Stick around, befriend your neighbor, play some games. We're going to go into post game. Next week is a discussion about fantasy, the golden age of fantasy, in books and in TV shows. None of which I have watched. I have not watched one episode of this TV show. I don't know what it's called, but George R. R. Martin is somehow involved. Please let me know what the title is. Maybe I'll watch it. Fran Wild, R.J. Barker, and Ted Williams. Okay, they will
God.
be here. Yes, I'm gonna just sit here and let Ted Williams run the show. So it's gonna be fantastic. And yeah, thank you, Premee.
Yeah, thank
Big
you.
fan.
This was super fun. Thanks everyone for coming.
It's more fun than Zoom.
It is more fun than Zoom. Oh god, I'm so tired of Zoom.
Zoom Doom. See you all next Wednesday at 12 o'clock Second Life time right here at the Second Life Book Club.